Other things have happened in history other than World War II. Very important, very significant, very horrific event.
But it's a direct comparison. Bro, not everything is a Nazi. When you're pointing at somebody who's doing a Sieg Heil while like waving around the swastika, not everything is a comparison to World War II. As a European fascist is invoking blood and soil to invade neighborhoods, like, what do you want? Neocons freak out at Trump DeSantis on Ukraine.
On to a little bit of a freak out over some comments that Ron DeSantis made, and also comments that Trump has made with regard to how they would approach the war in Ukraine. Our friends, Emily and Ryan over on Counterpoints, covered the responses that DeSantis and others sent in to Tucker Carlson. You'll recall he put out, a questionnaire and said, hey, if you're running for president on the Republican side, I want to hear from you. Here are the questions I have. Go ahead and, fill it out and send it in so we can talk about it here on the show. And a number of people did, including Ron DeSantis. And he positioned himself, he's been kind of like trying to have it both ways in terms of Ukraine. And he's still even with this statement, kind of left himself some wiggle room.
Actually, that's true. What was the last thing DeSantis said on Ukraine? I don't hear about his Republicans slammed DeSantis for calling war in Ukraine a territorial dispute. Okay, so he calls it a territorial dispute. He says it's a waste of money. Yeah, I figure. The far right, obviously wants Russia to win. That's still a more light-handed statement than a lot of the MAGA crowd has made.
But much more clear statement on the side of the Ukraine skeptics. And this has created a full-blown freakout among, a bunch of the Rupert Murdoch properties that have been very friendly to Ron DeSantis, a lot of the sort of like donor class, very upset about this. And of course, neocons like Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, et cetera, who are current office holders. But let's start with this. This pertains specifically to Trump. And Sagar, I want to get your reaction to all of this because I know you have many thoughts. Go ahead and put this up on the screen. Guys, this is from the former NATO chief. He says it would be a geopolitical catastrophe if Trump were to be nominated because in the campaign, his influence would be destructive.
Okay.
He's talking about the fact that, even if he just wins the nomination and loses the general election, that he is pushing the Republicans to be more Ukraine skeptical, more skeptical of additional aid. Let me just read a little bit more of this. He says by the way, this former NATO chief, whose last name is Rasmussen, serves as an advisor to the Ukrainian government and recently came to Washington to see members of Congress and Biden administration officials. He is lobbying them to supply more and heavier weapons and to make long-term security guarantees to Ukraine. He also predicts that Biden will wind up sending warplanes, calling it merely, quote, a question of time. So this person says that Trump's views on Ukraine are a geopolitical catastrophe.
These people don't actually believe in democracy. If Donald...
Right, okay. So before we get to that, the Republican position right now has not fully settled, but is largely settling on just being pretty overtly anti-Ukraine and anti-NATO. Fascists have a tendency towards fake isolationism. The problem with being in NATO is that most of the countries in NATO are democracies. Not all of them. Turkey is one of them. We're one of them. No, but like, if the Republicans win, obviously, like, they don't want to be sort of militarily tied to a bunch of countries that would represent contrary interests. The far right in America are pretty pro-Russia for fairly obvious reasons. It's the same reason that they liked Boris Johnson, the same reason they liked Bolsonaro. I mean, it's the same reason they like Putin. They spent most of Trump's presidency sucking him off, right? Like, I remember there were like T-shirts, better Russian than Democrat or something. It's the whole thing, Far right people tend to like far right people. I mean, go back to World War II. Hitler paired up with Mussolini, sure, but also with Japan. The Nazis, a European society, political force with racial supremacist overtones, paired up with Japan. Different race of people. Yeah, they called them honorary Aryans. Far-right dictators just tend to like far-right dictators.
Donald J. Trump is nominated, or Ron DeSantis, is nominated by the GOP primary Democratic process. That is a reflection of the views of people in the United States of America. Now, listen, I have a definite critique of our primary system. There's a lot of things that we could do.
So wait, what the fuck did he just say?
Says that Trump's views on Ukraine are a geopolitical catastrophe.
These people don't actually believe in democracy.
How? What?
If Donald J. Trump is nominated, or Ron DeSantis is nominated by the GOP primary Democratic process, that is a reflection of the views of people in the United States of America. Now,
yes, that is how primaries work. How does that say it would be bad for a person to win a primary? How does saying that, how's that anti-democracy?
Listen, I have a definite critique of our primary system. There's a lot of things that we could do, but based upon all the polling data that we have, this is not a fringe view. almost 50% of Americans agree with the approach and the rhetoric that Trump and DeSantis laid out there. As you said, let's be careful with DeSantis. He did leave himself a significant
50% of Americans? As the U.S. ramps up military aid to Ukraine, the share of Americans who say the U.S. is providing too much support has grown. About a quarter now say the U.S. is providing too much support, while 31% say it is giving the right amount, and 20% would like to see the U.S. give Ukraine additional assistance. Okay, not half then, a quarter. Only a quarter of the country is saying that we're offering, that we're giving them too much support. Man, look at how rapidly there was this shift in the Republicans. How a year ago, half of them wanted more support for Ukraine, and now it's all the way down to 17%. And that's because the Republican messaging has shifted so much. AP News says 60% were in favor of sending Ukraine weapons in February. Yeah.
Amount of wiggle room. But what really strikes me is the anti-democratic nature of all of this, which is shut up.
What?
This is about democracy. This is about autocracy. This is about, things that are much bigger than you could ever understand. Like
What? Guys, the former NATO chief literally just said it would be bad for Ukraine's victory in the war effort if they were to succeed in the primaries. Breaking Points is obviously going to be pro-Russia, but justify it. Sell me on it. How?
Like NATO and all that. And that's part of the reason why we're not really allowed to ask any of the realpolitik questions here.
Oh, by the way, that is always a really, really, really key indicator that you're listening to a propagandist or to a conspiracy theorist. You're not allowed to ask. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Jimmy Dore does this all the time. Why are people not allowed to ask about the vaccine? Have you looked at Congress? Have you looked at any Republican congressman? Have you looked at Trump? Any very powerful it happens all the time.
About, well, what if this does draw us into a broader war? At what point do Ukraine?
Yeah, you're not allowed to ask this thing that nobody has asked. What if it draws us into a broader war? No human legally in America has been given the permission to ask that question. I've never heard it before. It's not like I've been hearing it every day for the past year.
Ukrainian interests actually subjugate American interests. At what point?
What?
Would American interests diverge completely from Ukraine? Whatever's in the best interest of Ukraine and whatever's in the best interest of America, the neocons like Nikki Haley and Mike Pence are saying that they're one-to-one. There is no state on the planet of...
Incredible how Mike Pence was the vice president of Donald Trump, and now he's a rhino and a neocon just because he didn't, I don't know, allow the Jan 6 people to decapitate him or whatever. It's just because he wasn't allowed to deny, he literally could not stop the certification on January 6th. And because he didn't do the impossible thing, now he gets to be like a rhino neocon. They wanted to hang him, right? Yeah, they did.
Which there is a one-to-one relationship for the U.S. and anyone else. So their inability to articulate it that way is fundamentally anti-democratic. And it reminds me of the way that...
This is just jargon. It's incoherent jargon. Somebody saying, hey, it'd be bad for this political cause if these people did this, won this election. It's the idea that that's anti-democratic is insane. That's pro-democratic. It means you're engaging with the system that we use for our democracy. You're working within it.
That a lot of the generals and the foreign policy intelligentsia reacted to the Trump candidacy in 2016 when he laid out a consistent rhetorical, again, not on policy, rhetorical America First vision of the U.S. approach to NATO and specifically really to the U.S. of the world with our trade deals. Everybody.
Yeah, who would have guessed that people involved in international military and economic oversight would not like Trump with his retarded faux isolationism? Who could? Damn, a bunch of professional bureaucrats don't like when a blubbering retard becomes the commander-in-chief? Wow, that's crazy, dog. The person who is openly anti-NATO,
in the kind of Atlantic religion of basically what I've been starting to call it, in terms of their pledging support to Ukraine and all that, it has much more to do with ideology than it ever really has to do with making a case to people. So if you believe it would be a geopolitical catastrophe, then run on it. I think that DeSantis and Trump's view is extremely underrepresented in American politics. And should it come to the national stage in a clear choice between hawkishness on Ukraine and dovishness on Ukraine, it would be a very easy vote for a lot of people to cast, frankly, including me. And I think that...
Again, 25% of Americans think we're giving too much aid. He's completely making up his base of support here. Yeah, what's more, I really hate the terms hawk and dove being applied to military support to our allies. That is not how that works. Hawks are the people who want war, and doves are the people who want to avoid war. But when war is already happening between two other countries, you're not the one starting it, it's already happening over there, the important question becomes, okay, well, which would be the better side to win, and can we help affect that? That's just very basic foreign policy.
It would be and spark a genuine debate and challenge the assumptions that a lot of these people put forward in the media. What did you think, Crystal?
I 100% co-sign, especially your comment that, you know, this guy does not actually believe in democracy. And he gives up the game. He has this quote in here. He says,
okay, maybe we're actually about to get a quote that remotely supports the idea that this person does not support democracy.
The mere fact that Trump's thinking appeals to a certain element, a certain segment of the American public, will push American politics in the wrong direction.
You've got to be kidding me.
So what does that mean? He knows.
Oh no, that's actually it. Yeah, okay. We're literally saying it's anti-democratic to say that a candidacy's popularity could push Americans in the wrong direction, when all Crystal and Sagar do are talk about how the Democrats push Americans to the. Oh my God, man. Are they arguing candidates can't influence the electorate, or are they arguing that it's anti-democratic to point out the obvious thing that we all know happens? Completely incoherent, meaningless.
Knows that the American people,
Are these folks right-wing? I'm confused. Yes.
Percentage of which, not all, is at this point 50-50, and within the Republican base are more on Trump's side on this. He knows that. His whole bet is like, let's just make sure no one can say any of this, and then we can keep a lid on things and keep things moving in the same direction they.
No. Saying the population could be pushed in a bad direction because of this candidate is not him saying, let's keep a lid on it. A former NATO official has literally no authority to silence American discourse. This is the most insane. It's like somebody saying like, hey, I think it's bad when Nazis Sieg Heil on the presidential debate stage. And then Crystal Ball is like, this is a fundamentally anti-democratic statement. Basically what they're saying is they want to keep things under wrap and not allow the Americans to be exposed to these ideas, you know? They're basically saying that Americans aren't ready. They can't decide for themselves. So they're just going to keep that from happening. It's like, well, no, I just don't like the Nazi on the stage. What do you mean?
Been moving. So very, very revealing, the thinking of this individual. At the same time, Nikki Haley now taking some more shots at DeSantis. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. She says, this is kind of funny. She says, this is Cornyn on DeSantis. He says poll tested answers are not leading. Put the next one up on the screen here, guys. This is Nikki Haley. She says, Trump is right when he says DeSantis is copying him, first in his style, then on entitlement reform, now on Ukraine. I have a different style than Trump, and while I agree with him on most policies, I do not on those. She goes on to say,
it is true that DeSantis is copying Trump.
Republicans deserve a choice and not an echo, which is kind of a clever line there. But I also find it so revealing that even as, she's separating herself from Trump on a couple of issues here, but all the fire is trained at Ron DeSantis, who is not winning in most of the polls right now. But clearly these people continue to have this fanciful notion that Trump is just going to somehow magically disappear. And so the person they really need to take head on is Ron DeSantis.
I took that away as well. So there are two things to say. Number one, I actually do think Nikki Haley is correct. Ron DeSantis has previous very hawkish views on Russia. He said that there's no distance between myself and Ronald Reagan. He criticized President Obama for not sending enough heavy weaponry to Ukraine. Again, look, maybe he changed his view. I have no idea. Rhetorically, I still think it is a victory that he is not taking the neocon line. But as Michael Tracy and others have been pointing out, while
Michael Tracy. Oh my God. Michael, do you think it was good that the Nazis lost World War II? Well, I don't know if I can really say. I don't know if you can really talk about. I don't want to make statements on that. Michael, is it bad to be bad and good to be good? Well, I don't really know. Let me talk around that for 40 minutes. Michael. Okay.
He intimated that it is not a core national security interest to support Ukraine against Russia. He did not necessarily use the ironclad language. And if you parse what he said about not sending F-16s and about not getting U.S. ground troops involved, that's basically the Biden policy. DeSantis did not go as far as Donald Trump who literally is calling for immediate peace talks between Ukraine and Russia and promising to bring the conflict to a close in 24 hours. Okay, I don't think that's actually going to happen. But Trump is by far the farthest out there away from the Washington consensus and is a genuine break from the Biden foreign policy, not only saying we're not going to send more weapons, not.
Does Breaking Points have an agenda, or are they just they're fascists? Yeah. Specifically, they're Trump-aligned fascists, not DeSantis-aligned fascists, because they get their kicks being anti-establishment. So Trump is considered the maverick anti-establishment candidate, and DeSantis is considered like the establishment GOP, like catch-up fascist, basically. But yeah, basically, it's yeah. So like even Crystal, Crystal can have whatever personal position she wants, but like, what am I supposed to do here? She literally just said that it's anti-democratic for somebody to say that it would be bad for the electorate to be moved over to an idea. What am I like? That's anti-democrat. What? How? Like, she didn't just say it, she repeated it. And then she read a quote of somebody saying a perfectly ordinary thing and then looked up and gave me the DreamWorks eyebrow. Like, and on another thing that this person has said, I think Nazis are bad. There you have it. So like, what she actually believes is irrelevant to me. This segment is fascist.
Just saying it's not a core national security interest to not only support Ukraine, but also to not support regime change in Russia. Trump is the clear choice here for any
regime change in Russia. But is Biden currently pushing for regime change in Russia? I wasn't aware that SEAL Team 6 was waiting outside the Kremlin. What? We have like sleeper cells all over Moscow. What? Okay. Biden did say that was necessary. Okay. He said that as long as Putin was in charge, Russia was going to continue to be a piece of shit. Regime change implies that we're regime changing them. There's a pretty big difference between saying, yeah, Putin's a really shitty guy, and as long as he's in power, this is going to keep happening, and saying, yeah, we're deploying a special ops team to make it happen. That's totally different. I'm okay with Putin dying too. He's terrible. You know, but that's not the same as Biden taking it as like a foreign policy strategy to literally like send troops in. Like, guys, what we did with Saddam Hussein was regime change. We invaded Iraq and killed him. That was regime change. That was what we did. What we did with Germany in World War II, that was regime change. Though technically we didn't kill him, he killed himself. Calling it regime change is psychotic.
Anybody who wants to see or wants more peace in Ukraine, at least without a maximalist supporting aims of the Ukrainian government. So I kind of do think that Nikki Haley is correct. DeSantis is look, I mean, to the extent that he's genuine as any politician is, I have no idea. But given his basic sea change on this issue, it does seem to me that he doesn't have.
Yeah, calling that regime change would be like if you heard Biden say, and Kim Jong-un is a bad egg and not fit to lead the North Korean people, and then calling that statement an admission of a U.S. investment in regime change in North Korea. That literally, that would be like, it would be like saying that.
As well-grounded views in foreign policy as Trump. Look, again, he got rolled on a genuine policy level, but his consistent rhetoric on foreign policy and the way America.
It's so crazy how Sauger presents itself like some kind of intellectual. And he's like, all right, Trump did nothing and he is retarded. However, the impossible stuff that he said, he did say it consistently, loudly, and often. So
America was getting screwed was basically correct and was consistent for almost 35 or 40 years. Again, it did not manifest itself in his actual dealings in the White House. But
yeah.
Wouldn't that be indicative of like insane hypocrisy? Like, listen to how he's like, oh yeah, I like Trump because he's been consistent on his messaging. I mean, it didn't affect his behavior and he did exactly the same thing everyone else has done. But like, you know, the messaging, insane. Literally insane. Like, oh my God. Like, would this not be evidence of him being the biggest phony hypocrite who will say anything for applause? Like, it's like, oh yeah, man, I love the stuff that he says. You know, it'd be great if he did it, but like, it's cool just that he says it. You know, that's great. He's being praised for being a liar, you know?
Worldview and his outlook was effectively consistent throughout his entire adult life. So that's why.
He was a Democrat in the 90s. He was friends with Clintons. What? His politics haven't been consistent for his entire adult life. He's like 80 and he was in his 50s and a Democrat. Okay.
Whenever I look at these two things, I can't help but say Nikki Haley's not necessarily wrong here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have zero confidence or faith that either one of these would, either one of these guys would actually do the things that they're claiming they would do. DeSantis because of his history and some of his ties. Trump because when he was in office, like
consistently friends with Epstein. How can you say Donald Trump is not our man with 32 long years of close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein? Now that's loyalty.
we saw what happened there. So I would just want to put all of that out there. But yeah, I mean, Trump has clearly leaned in harder on the Ukraine skeptic side of things. And another thing that I noticed, Sagar.
Love the way they're using Ukraine skeptic as a way of signaling some kind of broader conspiratorial narrative that they're like pulling away from, as opposed to just they want Russia to win. Like that's it. Like they could, I would respect them so much more if they would just be like, I want to give Ukraine less weapons and let Russia win or hold their current territory. And just like say that, but instead they always have to go for this euphemism, you know? Always.
Is that DeSantis, who again, his rhetoric was not as strident as Trump's, has created a total freakout among the establishment Republican class that I have not seen a similar freakout. Maybe I just missed it over Trump making far more strident comments. They just are kind of like, well, I don't really want to take this guy on. But this one I'm going to lose my mind about. I think they also were hoping that DeSantis would be an ally in their hawkishness. New York Times had a breakdown of a lot of this. Here's a Jonathan Swan tweet highlighting Lindsey Graham not taking DeSantis's Ukraine statement well. Quote, the Neville Chamberlain approach to aggression never ends well, said Graham, comparing DeSantis to the British Prime Minister who appeased Adolf Hitler. Put the next one up on the screen. This is the full New York Times report.
Wow, I can't imagine why anyone would invoke allegories of historical appeasement strategies in this case. That's so crazy. That's wild, man. Rare Republican W. It's kind of funny because like you might notice that the people who claim to be the most pro-America are actually the ones who trash America the most. Biden is the one who gets called anti-American, but when you hear him talk about America, he's like, America is the tree on the hill shining with hope. You know, like liberals talk about America like it's a angelic city, you know, it's like the silver city in the sky. But then you listen to Trump and Trump's like, our country is falling apart and burning and being torn to pieces. Our streets are being ravaged with rats and viral contagions. Homeless people build shelters in the middle of our streets, causing 500 car pileups. And, you know, and it's like, well, okay. And likewise, like, you know, the most pro-American candidates are usually going to be, it's kind of like an upping gradient, but like fascists are not pro-America, they're pro-fascism, if that makes any sense. Fascism is generally seen as a kind of absolute loyalty to the state, and while that's true, the state is also usually synthesized with another concept, often race. So obviously subservience to the German state was like the big thing with the Nazis, but it wasn't really about the state, right? Because the Weimar Republic to them was an illegitimate institution, even though it was undeniably the expression of state power before the Nazis took place. Or took power. In reality, it's about their idea of the state, which is, of course, the Aryan fatherland. For Christian nationalist fascists, it's about like white Christian America. But they would burn actual America to the ground if it meant getting to build up a facsimile of white Christian America. You know what I mean? Like the Nazis led Germany to ruin in an effort to build like the greater like pan-European Aryan empire for Lebensraum. And that's not like a sane mentality, but just understand their definition of a state is a little bit more variable than ours.
You know, they got all kinds of quotes in here. They got quotes from Liz Cheney. DeSantis is wrong and seems to have forgotten the lessons of Ronald Reagan. Hugh Hewitt. Marco Rubio talking to Hugh Hewitt says, I don't know what he's trying to do or what the goal is. Senator John Cornyn, as I said before, says he's disturbed. Governor Chris Christie says it is naive and a complete misunderstanding of the historical context of what's going on. This one I really enjoyed, Sagar. They reached out for comment to Charles Kupperman, who served under John Bolton as deputy.
What are the chances Trump tries to run? 100%. No shot he doesn't.
National security advisor in the Trump administration. He said Mr. DeSantis had shown a very poor understanding of our national security interests. And this one was interesting. A very well-known conservative Wall Street Journal columnist, Kimberly Strassel, she urged DeSantis not to join what she called Mr. Trump's GOP surrender caucus. Quote, the governor.
He already announced, didn't he? Oh, yeah, he did, didn't he? Tries to. No, yeah, he did. I forget we're getting so close to the 2024 election. Yeah.
Has an opportunity to contrast a bold, well thought out.
It's actually really, really difficult to know with Donald Trump because he never stops campaigning. Like, other candidates will stay kind of quiet until they announce, and then they'll start talking, but Donald Trump never stopped. So it's basically, he's basically just been campaigning since like 2015.
Policy with Mr. Trump's opaque retreatism. And I say that's noteworthy because obviously Wall Street Journal is a Rupert Murdoch property, and they have been pushing DeSantis relentlessly on Fox News,
Yeah,
Wall
it's
Street
DeSantis
Journal,
who hasn't
and other
announced.
of their outlets as well.
Yeah, you know what I took away from this, which is that it hurts more whenever it's like the one who you thought was going to be the guy to take on Trump. With Trump, so much of this is priced in. That's why many of these senators and others don't even really bother responding to what he says. Also because there's a bigger political price. But with DeSantis, it's kind of like an Anakin Skywalker thing. It's like, you were the chosen one, man. He's like, you were the chosen one. You were supposed to deliver us from Trump.
It's so cool how people are acting this way. Over 5% of our military budget.
Embrace him. And yet, that's what's the kind of rhetorically that he's been doing here. Yeah, I've been enjoying the freak out. Also, you know, once again, just to show you how historically illiterate and really just brain dead a lot of foreign policy thinking. Are we able to have any conversation without bringing up Neville Chamberlain? I actually was not.
You know what? No. When you're talking about European military expansionism and conquest of adjacent nations from a European fascist that's talked about blood and soil, no, you do have to bring up Neville Chamberlain. I'm sorry. If somebody could just stop bringing up the Nazis, as we call trans people degenerate, and Sieg Heil, and talk about how they're Untermensch who need to be annihilated. Like, what do you want? You're doing it. Stop doing it.
Where that history began in 1938. You know, color me shocked. It turns out that relations between states, especially in this part of the world, in Ukraine and Russia, goes back, several thousand years, 100 years, even.
As opposed to the relationship between Germany, Austria, the Rhineland, and the Sudetenland, which, you know, just a recent thing. Okay, what is the Holy Roman Empire?
And, you know, just select for the last 500 years, you're going to get a very different view, not only of the conflict, but also just of the way that many different types of conflicts are brought to an end. And that's ultimately what the question is like, is Putin Hitler, or is he your run-of-the-mill Russian czar / like Soviet apparatus?
My anthropology brain just lit up. Did he say thousands of years? Okay, so he's not talking about the country. So there's obviously a lot of nonsense there, but what he's actually saying is that the Russians have like an ethnic right to dominate the Ukrainians. The only reason you would like try to differentiate Nazi Germany and Russia in this context by bringing up like, oh, well, they've been at it for thousands of years, is the indication that there's some kind of like preternatural ethnic destiny for Russians to express hegemony over Ukrainians, which is, by the way, the exact position that a Russian fascist would have. Do you remember how Putin cursed out Lenin for like the independence of Ukraine, like the legal distinction of Ukraine? It is literally like the argument the Russian fascists have. Like, okay, well, Ukraine's not a real place. It's like, it's ours to take. And that's basically what Sagar's saying here, because that's the only relationship that the perceived long-standing bias at play here has with the like lack of like analogy viability to, you know, Neville Chamberlain or whatever. It's basically just the fascist argument, you know?
Because those are actually two very different policy responses.
Because other things have happened.
It's Hitler.
Other things have happened in history other than World War II. Very important, very significant, very horrific event.
But it's a direct comparison. It's not. I do love this genre because we've all heard of Godwin's Law. Of it just reminds me of the like, bro, not everything is a Nazi. When you're pointing at somebody who's doing a Sieg Heil while like waving around the swastika, it's like, bro, not everything is a comparison to World War II. As a European fascist is invoking blood and soil to invade neighborhoods, it's like, what do you want?
But other things in history have happened besides World War II. Hey guys,
not
ready
true.
or not?
Vosh, this clip of you about Crystal and Sagar has never been more true. Destiny tried to call you out for this 2 days ago on Lonerbox. Vosh lol. On Lonerbox? I mean at Lonerbox? A gay pride flag for their LGBT month. And Crystal Ball will say, yeah, well, this is good, I guess, but we have to recognize that corporate hegemony is never going to sincerely, you know, promote the interests of gay people. This is just a virtue signaling attempt to get their attention. And Sagar will say,
you're completely right. This is just virtue signaling. Corporations have been brainwashed by post-Frankfurt neo-Marxist academics who are trying to disseminate an anti-white agenda by educating the wealthy and the children of the wealthy to hate white people in the pursuit of a wokeness cult.
And Crystal Ball will say, well, I don't know if I agree about that, but I do agree that corporations are bad. And Sagar will say,
Yes, corporations are bad. You know who else believes that? Tucker Carlson. Let's go to a Tucker Carlson clip, folks.
cue 2 minutes of Tucker Carlson in the middle of a segment about how black people aren't humans, talking about how corporations are bad because they support black people, but in like an insincere way. Then they cut back to Rising. Yeah, wow, you know, you gotta hand it to him when he says stuff that could be a right or left-leaning position that's really kind of ambiguous, you know? And then Sagar will say,
Yeah, I completely agree. I really do think the insincere attempts to appeal to the interests of BLM on the part of corporations really signals how corporations are furthering the downfall of Western civilization. Really, it is nearly impossible for conservatives to imagine themselves living in the glorious, culturally hegemonous America that they once lived in back 50, 60 years ago, as long as these corporations continue to shill for anti-white agendas.
and then Crystal Ball will say, well, I don't know if I agree about that, but at least we agree corporations are bad. And then the segment ends. That's it.
It never ends. It's like 2.5 years old and nothing's changed. Could an AI make that piece of art? Damn, Bosch, how are you so pinpoint spot on? Well, to be fair, she makes it easy.